Chapter 524. However, Luo Peisong was not going to let him off easily. Gifts blind the eyes. Do you think I let you gain weight for free? Just you wait, if you gain 1 caddy, I'll make you lose 10 caddies later. As a great scholar, these words were extremely uncouth. However, Jiang Wanli did not show any reaction. Obviously, he was used to this kind of teacher. After following him for a few years, no one knew better than him that this teacher, other than some eccentricities, did not have the elegance that a great scholar should have. In his opinion, he was much worse than the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs. However, this was only shown in front of people close to him. However, from these words, he could basically confirm that his previous guess was correct. Moreover, his teacher knew more than him. Jiang Wanli decided to wash up. Although he was quite clean, he was still out of prison. Although he was treated quite well in prison, he did not feel so good psychologically. Because he was out for many years, it was definitely not as good as being taken care of at home. Even if there was a servant, Jiang Wanli would do it himself most of the time. However, after entering the house, Jiang Wanli found that there were many more things. Where did they come from? Young master, the Luo family sent them over. They said that they are for you to get over your shock. In fact, in the servant's opinion, these gifts were too much and too expensive. Jiang Wanli saw that his servant's expression was not right, so he casually flipped through them. His movements became careful in an instant. He picked them up and was reluctant to part with them. He thought that it was no wonder. Since they were given to him, it was obviously to his liking. It was actually a relatively simple thing to give him something that he liked without any specific understanding. As a scholar, he just had to choose from the masses. Calligraphy and painting books, especially the works of famous masters and the only copies, even if he did not like them from the bottom of his heart, he could collect these things. To a scholar, it was also a kind of capital that he could show off. Otherwise, it would only be a matter of face if he used it as a gift. All these in front of him were undoubtedly exquisite treasures. He, Jiang Wanli, had seen many good things, but he could not help but be moved in the face of these. It was obvious that they were really extraordinary. Jiang Wanli pondered for a while. From his teacher, he could basically see part of the Luo family's background. However, to casually give a junior like him so many good things, this was not something the Luo family could do. It was not that they could not take it out, but it was too much. Therefore, these things most likely came from Jin Qin Wang Fu. After all, the other party was a Wang Ye. Even if it was compensation, it was far from reaching the point of exhausting everything. He was just a small pawn. His words had just entered the officialdom and really had no use. Therefore, this matter of being valued was actually a joke. This kind of heavy gift could only explain one point: the other party had a lot of things and simply did not care. Things that were very precious and numerous in other people's eyes, in the other party's eyes, were probably just a hair from 9 oxen, not worth mentioning. As such, Jiang Wanli calmly accepted it. In any case, he really liked it. It belonged to the category where he could only lend it to a friend for 3 days. Put it away. Don't damage it at all. Yes, young master. However, is there really no problem with young master? The manservant was still somewhat worried. Speaking of which, he and Jiang Wanli grew up together. Although they were master and servant, Jiang Wanli did not treat him unfairly. He had even attended classes with Jiang Wanli and had seen a lot. Therefore, this manservant's eyesight was even better than many scholars. If I tell you to accept it, then accept it. What's with all this nonsense? I know what I'm doing. Hearing these words, the manservant was relieved. He chuckled twice and promised that he would properly tidy up the things. The manservant was absolutely convinced and worshipped his young master. In his eyes, there was no one more intelligent than his young master. Whatever the young master said and did, then it must be right. The next day, Jiang Wanli returned to Hanlin Academy. When everyone saw that he was intact, they thought, it must be the emperor who gave the order early. However, from this point, it was enough to see the emperor's fondness for editor Jiang. Therefore, those who saw the wind set the helm all gathered around Jiang Wanli, saying things like, I knew brother Jiang was wronged. What kind of character does Jiang Laodi have? How could he do such a thing? Virtuous nephew Jiang Su Shue still needs to use such underhanded means. After this disaster, there will be good fortune in the future. Some people still wanted to be thick-skinned. Some people seemed to have completely forgotten that they were one of the people who slandered Jiang Wanli the most fiercely in the beginning. Jiang Wanli, on the other hand, was good-natured. His smile did not change as he politely responded to them one by one. Many people's hearts skipped a beat. Well, there was a high chance that they had offended editor Jiang. Moreover, they originally thought that he had become stupid from studying. Otherwise, how could he be so knowledgeable? In the end, his degree of slyness was not inferior to those who had been in the industry for many years. Some of them retreated and decided to stay far away from him in case he took revenge on them. After all, the other party's background was there. Of course, there were also people who wanted to redeem themselves. It did not matter if they were to be humble. They were all scheming for Jiang Wanli's connections behind him. Thinking about it, if they could get on his good side, they did not know how many detours they would take. In Jiang Wanli's eyes, he was clear in his heart. No matter what kind of attitude he had, he was very slippery and evasive. He seemed to be very easy to talk to, but in fact, he did not say anything. The examination of the Scholar of Merit was postponed for a few days. The three Luo brothers successfully passed the examination and then went to Hanlin Academy to laze around. Although it was said that those who were not Jinshe could not enter Hanlin Academy, and those who were not Hanlin Academy could not enter the cabinet, was the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel so ambitious to put all three of his grandsons into Hanlin Academy? One must know that after entering Hanlin Academy, one generally had to endure 3 years of experience. It was impossible to be promoted without special circumstances. Now, the Ministry of Revenue was still short of manpower, and there were also vacancies in other places. As the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Luo Peishan wanted to seek benefits for his 3 grandsons. As long as it was not too excessive, no one would mind some of the better positions. With him as a backer, even if they were new to the officialdom and had no experience, they would definitely be able to do well. Now, all of them were pushed into Hanlin Academy. What was the meaning of this? Obviously, Luo Peishan began to keep a low profile after being high profile. In fact, many people in high positions knew that it was not necessarily a bad thing to stay in Hanlin Academy for 3 years. After 3 years, the situation might have completely stabilized. At that time, there would still be competition, but it would not be like during the fight for the throne, where they might lose their lives. It was said that Luo Peishan was an old fox. It was definitely not a joke. Another storm had subsided. Of course, this was only on the surface. Moreover, even if it really subsided, there would be another wave in the dark. It was hard to tell when it would come out. The weather was getting hotter, but the matters in the northwest were still not completely dealt with. It was already May, and it was the Dragon Boat Festival. There were too many things to do. Luqingdi did not have the leisure to go out of the palace to watch the dragon boat race. However, he held a banquet in the palace, inviting civil and military officials above the 3rd rank and their families. Is Ah Yuan going to make a move at the banquet? Jingwan asked curiously. Make a move? Wan, you think too much. I just want to be a spectator. Why should I make a move? Jingwan raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, then, let's wait and see. https://11/11807/139657646. Chapter 525. She wanted to see if noble consort Su and Prince Rui could still make a comeback after this. If they could still make a comeback, Jingwan would admit that they were cockroaches that couldn't be killed easily. However, no matter how tenacious this cockroach was, once it was aimed, it was only a matter of a shoe's sole. Don't talk about killing it, even slapping it into dregs was fine. On festive days, Jingwan had always dressed herself up jubilantly. In the beginning, it was because Gong Mama and the others deliberately dressed her up in this aspect. Later on, Jingwan herself was used to it. In any case, whether it was winter or summer clothes, those clothes that were mainly red, silver, and other colors, she was able to suppress them. In addition, her complexion was good and her skin was good. That kind of dressing made her whole person even more radiant and seemed to be even more beautiful. No matter how one looked at it, there was no family's Wang Fei or Jun Wang Fei that could be compared to her. At this time, no one could deceive themselves to think that Jin Qinhuang's feelings for Jin Qinhuang Fei didn't exist. Everything that Jin Qinhuang did was pretended. Jin Qinhuang clearly held her in the palm of his hand like a treasure. Don't say that Jin Qinhuang jinxed his wife. Other than the Wang Fei, no other woman could get close to him. Jin Qinhuang might jinx those who had a status with him, but those who didn't have a status were completely fine. Looking at those in the past, it was the best proof. If Jin Qinhuang wanted, he could raise as many beauties as he wanted. However, ever since he got married, was there still a mess of women by his side? Jin Qinhuang was henpecked? Don't joke around. Jin Qinhuang was the famous living king of hell. Someone who could even throw away his own father's face. Would he be henpecked? Therefore, after all was said and done, it could only be the most impossible possibility. How many people were burning with jealousy, but all of them could only put it in their hearts. So what if they were jealous? Last time, the two Jin Qinhuang's prospective Cifei, if they didn't leave the house, then they died in their sedan chairs. Even if they wanted to share Jin Qinhuang's favor, even if they yearned for Jin Qinhuang Fu's glory, splendor and wealth, or adored Jin Qinhuang as a person, then they must have the life to step into Jin Qinhuang Fu. If they couldn't do this step, then what else could they talk about? It must be said that Jin Qinhuang Fei is indeed blessed. Otherwise, why would Jin Qinhuang, who was once in the midst of hundreds of flowers, take a fancy to her, even to the point of giving up his heart for her? However, in the end, it's still a little too little awe. After being favored alone for more than 2 years, there's still no movement in her belly. Everyone knows that Jin Qinhuang Fu's physician is very skilled, but it's still like this. I'm afraid that Jin Qinhuang may have disdained those women's status in the past and thought that they were not fit to be the mother of his children. Needless to say, the people around them all laughed without knowing the meaning behind it. What did it mean? It couldn't be any more obvious. How long could Jin Qinhuang Fei be proud of herself? It was just these few years. Jin Qinhuang was already 25 years old. It couldn't be that when he reached 30, he still didn't have a son or half a daughter. At that time, there was no need for others to do anything. Jin Qinhuang Fei herself would have to bring people into Jin Qinhuang Fu. Even if she kept the children and left the mother behind, how long could she last? Even if Jin Qinhuang was a sentimental person, but when Jin Qinhuang Fei was 30 or 40 years old, would you still have the face to serve her in bed? If you don't want face, then this man would also be boring. Which man wasn't the same, not liking delicate and tender little girls, but liking an old and haggard woman? Thinking like this, the jealousy in their hearts faded. However, these people seemed to only be able to talk about this. Every time their hearts were unbalanced, just thinking about it like this, there was indeed some effect. The method of mental victory would not be ineffective anywhere. Jingwan could actually feel those gazes, but from the beginning, she didn't care. Those sisters-in-law of hers might have used this to provoke her in the beginning, but after eating a loss, they were basically honest. But now, among the princes who were conferred the title of prince, it seemed that only Wang didn't have a son. That's right, even on the surface, Prince Rui couldn't use this point to attack him. In fact, after Prince Rui's son was born, many people who supported him became more determined. It was just that Prince Rui himself still didn't have the emperor's heart. The empress' illness had not improved, imperial concubine Su was grounded, and even if Wei Xianfei gave birth to a son, her body was damaged because of premature birth, so the child wasn't that good. Moreover, when she gave birth, Jingwan disliked Luqingdi once, so the joy of old age was gone. Luqingdi also didn't like that mother and son pair. Wei Xianfei didn't have a mother's status because of her son, and now she was getting worse and worse than before. She couldn't even compare to the other lower-ranked concubines who had children. After calculating, the woman closest to Luqingdi was still Qin Shufei. After Jingwan returned to the capital, she went to the palace to see Qin Shufei. She looked good, and didn't have the abnormalities she had before they went to the northwest. At the banquet, Luqingdi also put aside those troublesome matters, which was rare for him. However, there would always be people with bad intentions who would think of ways to bring the matter to Wang Fei's sore spot. It was natural for Luqingdi to ask about it. Sure enough, Luqingdi's face sank. Looking at Jingwan, he was still satisfied with this daughter-in-law. However, if she couldn't have children, that would be a big mistake. Lao Lu's wife, Zhen knows that you are a good person, but Lao Lu can't not have children. Zhen doesn't care how you husband and wife are, children are a must. The smile on Jingwan's face didn't change. Fu Huang, what are you talking about? Not having children may not be a woman's problem. Qin Wang faintly cut off Jingwan's words. His words weren't heavy, but it was enough to make the scene freeze. Which family didn't have children? Then the problem was definitely a woman. When Qin Wang's words came out, everyone looked at him strangely. In the end, was he really unscrupulous? Or was there really a problem? However, no matter which one it was undoubtedly to help Wang Fei out of her predicament. https://11/11807/139977813. Chapter 526. Luqingdi was so angry that he smashed his cup, but Qin Wang didn't even give him a glance. Luqingdi scolded his unfilial son several times, then his cold gaze swept towards Jingwan. Obviously, in his opinion, there was no problem with his son. The one with a problem was his daughter-in-law. Moreover, she seduced his son to disregard his dignity to protect her. She was undoubtedly a foxy seductress. No matter how good his impression of her was before, now it had reached the freezing point. As long as the emperor's mind was still clear, it was a taboo to favor only one person, and it was the same for his son. Because in their opinion, once he was bewitched by a woman, it was easy to do wrong. Moreover, as a member of the imperial family, especially the emperor's son, they were the most honorable group of people in the world. How could they be tied up by a woman? Even when Luqingdi wanted to tie the imperial Gui Fei to himself, he didn't absolutely favor only her. Moreover, the imperial Gui Fei had never whispered in his ear. Therefore, Luqingdi never felt that he did anything wrong. Jingwan helplessly glanced at her husband. Say, it's fine if you're the one pulling the hatred, but don't drag her into it as well. Clearly, it's fine if you're just going to brush it off with a few words. Although it's because you, as a son, schemed against him, he's still the emperor, the one with the most authority in Qiyuan on the surface. It was just that Jingwan looked at his indifferent appearance. Forget it, what kind of virtue he had, didn't she already know it? Therefore, Jingwan also calmed down and didn't say anything. Luqingdi's cold gaze was also ignored. Looking at the couple who didn't put him in their eyes, Luqingdi was angry. However, he couldn't really do anything to them. His son was reluctant, but what about his daughter-in-law? He was the father-in-law and the emperor. If he made a fuss over such a small matter, it would be beneath his dignity. His eyes turned and fell on the courtiers, Iching Luo. Luo Peishan's face was slightly frightened, but his heart was as calm as the couple. Just as he was about to get up, he saw Zhongqing walking from the side to a place a few steps below the emperor's seat. The banquet was held in the imperial garden. Reporting to the emperor, Princess Heyang requests an audience. He carried his saber and stood tall and straight. Compared to Li Suyen, Yu Zhongqing was full of righteousness and had an extraordinary bearing. Yu Zhongqing was still unmarried and was coveted by many people. However, on the surface, Yu Zhongqing was alone and did not care about marriage. To some extent, Luqingdi also hoped that Yu Zhongqing would work for him wholeheartedly. Once Yu Zhongqing got married, he would be selfish and have weaknesses. Therefore, when Luqingdi asked Yu Zhongqing hypocritically and Yu Zhongqing flatly refused, the matter was left unsettled. Many people wanted to act as matchmakers for him, but the commander of the imperial guards was missing and unapproachable. In fact, Yu Zhongqing originally had a fiancée. Although she was dead, he had rejected other people. Other than the fact that he was deeply in love with his fiancée and wanted to avenge her, there was also his family's blood feud. Other than that, he also knew Luqingdi's thoughts. Since that was the case, why did he need to start a family? Later, we'll talk about it later. Now, Yu Zhongqing was not the focus. The focus was on his words. Speaking of which, most people knew who Princess Heyang was. After all, what she had done in the past was too valiant. However, not many people knew that she was still alive. Now, except for those who clearly knew, the rest were still wondering which of the princesses had the title Heyang. It seemed that neither the princesses nor Luqingdi's sisters had the title Princess Heyang. So, who on earth was she? Those who knew were surprised. Princess Heyang had no contact with the royal family on the surface. Otherwise, how could most people not know that there was a princess in the royal family who was more honorable than Great Elder Princess? Great Elder Princess's honor came from the fact that she had the same mother as Luqingdi and was self-aware. However, even Luqingdi had to respect Princess Heyang. Princess Heyang rarely went to Luqingdi. But once she did, it was definitely not a trivial matter. Let's not talk about the distant past. Just in the recent years, there was once at the western border 3 years ago. Because of the problem of soldiers' pay and provisions, there was almost a war. Last year, hundreds of thousands of grains disappeared without a trace, and the entire Ministry of Revenue was almost confiscated. But now, she directly revealed her identity as a princess. How could Luqingdi not be shocked? He also complained in his heart. Why can't they talk about it in private? Why can't they talk about it another time? Why must they talk about it in public on such an important festival? Why can't they stop talking about it? No matter what Luqingdi thought in his heart, he couldn't say it out, let alone ignore it. However, Jingwan's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Li Hongyuan. She didn't forget his main purpose of coming to the palace today. Jingwan now had to suspect that Prince Rui's son actually had something to do with Princess Heyang. Then, it could only be said that the King of Hell was still fast, accurate, and ruthless. He not only dug a hole, but also filled it with thorns and buried a sharp knife in it. Li Hongyuan seemed to feel Jingwan's attention. He turned around and looked at her. He smiled as if he had confirmed Jingwan's idea. Jingwan narrowed her eyes slightly and also smiled. She didn't say anything. She also knew how to watch a play. Princess He-yang was dressed in a formal dress, looking graceful, luxurious, and domineering. Her aggressive momentum made Jingwan unable to hide the surprise on her face at the first time when she saw her. However, at this moment, everyone's attention was on Princess He-yang, so Jingwan quickly concealed her surprise. But the strange look in her eyes couldn't disappear. The current Princess He-yang was completely different from the Yun-yang that Jingwan knew, except for her face. Yun-yang's clothes and manners were all like a prostitute. The current Princess He-yang was like an empress, let alone a princess. If she didn't know Yun-yang's identity, Jingwan would probably think that they were just two people who looked alike. Princess He-yang stood under the throne with a cold face. She squatted and said, "Your Majesty." It seemed that she didn't care about it. Her face almost said, "I'm in a very bad mood. Imperial Aunt, please rise." Luchengdi was displeased because of Princess He-yang's attitude, but he looked very attentive on the surface. After that, everyone present stood up and saluted. Even Great Elder Princess was very respectful and didn't dare to neglect her at all. "Imperial Aunt, you refused every time I invited you to a banquet. I'm very happy that you can come today. Come on, set up a banquet for Imperial Aunt." "No need." Princess He-yang directly waved her hand and interrupted Luchengdi. "I have something to do. I'll leave after dealing with it." The smile on Luchengdi's face froze for a moment, but it disappeared in a flash. Imperial Aunt had made a lot of contributions to the Qi Yuan, so even if he was unhappy, he could only endure it. "What do you want me to do? Do you need me to do anything?" Princess He-yang glanced at him and then looked around. Finally, her eyes fell on the table where Prince Rui was sitting. Princess He-yang flicked her sleeves and walked straight over. Prince Rui's heart beat inexplicably. He stood up and said, "What can I do for you, Imperial Aunt?" His attitude was humble and his face was gentle. Those who didn't know him would at least have a good impression of him. Princess He-yang glanced at him from head to toe and still didn't change her expression. Then, she turned her eyes to Princess Lu, the child in her arms. "Let me have a look." He probably didn't expect that Princess He-yang was aiming at the little heir of Prince Rui. Maybe because of his guilty conscience, Prince Rui only felt his heart beat faster. "Imperial Aunt, although this boy is only a few months old, his hands are strong enough and he's noisy. I'm afraid that he will hurt you, so..." Before he could finish, Princess He-yang bent down and picked up a cup on the table. She crushed it and threw it at Prince Rui's face. "Am I not as good as your wife?" Prince Rui couldn't maintain the gentle look on his face. "Please forgive me, Imperial Aunt. When Prince Rui was about to say something, Princess Lu had already stood up and handed the child to Princess He-yang. Because of this unknown child, Princess Lu's own daughter was worried sick because she didn't know what was going on with her. Princess Lu looked very pale. She didn't dare to go out without putting on a thick layer of powder. The reason why she showed up at this banquet was that her husband threatened her with her other two daughters and asked her to pretend that she was in a good mood. After all, she finally had a son and got what she wanted. However, holding this child, she wanted to strangle him to death. Therefore, at this moment, she didn't hesitate to give the child away, no matter what the purpose of this noble princess, who she didn't know, was. Prince Rui subconsciously wanted to snatch the child, but Princess He-yang slapped the back of Prince Rui's hand. At that moment, Prince Rui only felt that his hand was numb from the pain. He withdrew his hand and hid it in his sleeve, clenching his fist. Princess He-yang didn't feel strange with the child in her arms, but she was obviously a little careful. Princess He-yang let the noisy little boy lie on her shoulder and then lifted his little clothes. Her eyes fell on the back of the little boy's waist. There was a red birthmark half the size of a palm. It was very eye-catching. Princess He Yang's movements were gentle, but her expression became colder and colder. When she looked at Prince Rui again, her eyes seemed to be filled with ice. Prince Rui didn't know the specific situation, but there was a faint voice in his heart telling him that if this was exposed, he would end up very miserably. His body couldn't help trembling slightly. Prince Rui told himself to calm down. No matter what, he had to slap. With a clear sound, Prince Rui, a big man, was directly slapped by Princess He Yang. He staggered and almost fell. Princess He Yang swung her hand. You can't give birth to a son, but you dare to have ideas about my grandson. You're really something. Prince Rui was furious. He originally wanted to argue with Princess He Yang, but when he heard this, there was a buzzing sound in his head, as if he had been hit hard with a hammer. He was completely dumbfounded. The others also exploded. After a short time of digesting the news, they began to talk about it with a buzz. Jingwan approached Li Hongyuan. Princess He Yang has a son. She was obviously shocked. She doesn't lack men. What's so strange about having a son? Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan, thinking that Jingwan was making a fuss about nothing. No, that. She was a royal princess after all. It was fine if she kept a gigolo, but if she had an illegitimate son, wouldn't it be? Wan is not an ordinary person. Why can't she accept this? Princess He Yang is also an extraordinary person. Naturally, she can't be treated with common sense. If she took the royal family's reputation seriously, she wouldn't be the Princess He Yang today. She would be like other princesses, ordinary, unhappy, and die in some unknown corner. Obviously, the two extraordinary people Li Hongyuan mentioned were not the same thing. Jingwan was startled, and then she smiled. I was thinking too much. I only thought that the women in the world were not too different, so I was too shocked. I forgot that no matter where you are, there are always some very special people. If it was Li Hongyuan in his previous life, he would definitely not be able to accept this kind of thing when there was a big change. But now, he accepted it very well. In other words, because it had nothing to do with him, he didn't care in essence. How many children does Princess He Yang have? Once Jingwan accepted it completely, she began to gossip. The only son, who has just turned 20 years old. Princess He Yang arranged a good place for him and his biological father. Coincidentally, his wife and third princess sister-in-law's third child were conceived around the same time, Li Hongyuan said lightly. So, he was cruelly used by you. Because everyone was talking and their attention was on Prince Rui and Princess He Yang, the two of them talked quite openly. Prince Rui only felt that it was over, completely over. When he first received the child and saw the birthmark on his back, he also felt that it was a little inappropriate. But when he thought that the child's family had been killed, he gave up. After all, it was not a big deal to have a birthmark on one's body. But if it was scalded or cut off for no reason, it would be noticed by others. Under normal circumstances, no one could easily see the body of a prince's heir except those who were closest to him and took care of him carefully. But now, he actually fell into the trap of this birthmark. What was the problem? Why was the child Princess He Yang's grandson? Sure enough, he was schemed against from the beginning to the end. Great Aunt, https:///11/118007/140359553. Mobile Edition. Chapter 527. Shut up. I don't want to hear a word from you now. You don't need to quibble. Your daughter is in my hands. Princess Heong carefully protected the child. There was no warmth in her eyes. She looked at Prince Rui with a stern look in her cold eyes. It was almost written on her face that if he dared to say another word, it would not be settled with just a slap. However, before Prince Rui could react, Princess Lu's face changed greatly. My darling is in your hands. Princess, can you give her back to me? Princess Lu was indifferent to what happened in front of her, but now she couldn't hold it anymore. It was not an exaggeration to say that she broke down in an instant. Princess Lu pulled Princess Hyang's clothes and knelt in front of her with a sorrowful face. Princess, please give my darling back to me. After she was born, I didn't even have time to look at her before she was taken away. Princess, I beg you. Princess Lu had no idea about Prince Rui's great cause. No matter whether he succeeded or not, she didn't expect to get any benefits. Maybe she once had the ambition to be the mother of the country, but some things had been worn away by the accumulation of time. She knew Li Hongming too well. When Princess Lu said this, well, there was no need to say anything. As one of the main characters, he had admitted it. Then there was nothing to say. It was useless to quibble. Even if Lu Qing wanted to cover for him, or to cover the shame of the royal family, it was impossible. At this moment, it was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. However, everyone had different thoughts. Those who sided with Prince Rui were grieving, while those who opposed Prince Rui were naturally delighted. They couldn't hide their joy and schadenfreude no matter how hard they tried. They could only use other things to hide it. However, no one would pay attention to them at this moment. Of course, there were also some who were expressionless and didn't feel the slightest fluctuation in their hearts, because this had nothing to do with them. However, looking at Prince Rui, although he knew that he couldn't escape this time, there was no room for negotiation since Princess Lu had revealed everything. Prince Rui naturally wanted to eat her alive. However, Princess Lu pretended not to see it. She just kept begging Princess Hyang. Did Princess Lu lose her mind and reveal everything because she knew the whereabouts of her daughter? Of course not. After all, Princess Lu was not crazy. She should know the severity of the matter. Therefore, it was one thing for her to lose her composure after hearing the whereabouts of the children. She also did it on purpose. She had completely fallen out with Li Hongming. To some extent, if Li Hongming ascended the throne, it would not benefit her at all. Moreover, because she knew too much, she might be killed at some time in the future. Moreover, as time went by, Princess Lu increasingly felt that Li Hongming's chances of ascending the throne were slim. Instead of this, it was better to take advantage of the current situation. Moreover, if Li Hongming fell, she would have the possibility of keeping her child. Not to mention that she didn't care about their relationship as husband and wife, it was this man who didn't care about his own flesh and blood first. Princess Hyang waved her hand to push Princess Lu away and didn't pay attention to her at all. Was the little commandery princess of Prince Rui's mansion really in Princess Hyang's hands, or was it just a lie she made up? If it was the former, she wouldn't say how she would deal with the child. Princess Hyang looked at Emperor Lu Qingdi. Obviously, she didn't want to keep her here and let irrelevant people laugh at her. I think His Majesty already knows about this matter and will give me a satisfactory explanation. I won't say anything more and will leave now. Obviously, Princess Hyang was very angry because of this matter. She was perfunctory in front of Emperor Lu Qingdi, or a little bit dangerous. When she came, she was domineering and arrogant, but when she left, she was decisive. At this moment, Emperor Lu Qingdi's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. As the emperor, he was humiliated in such a way, but he couldn't lose his temper. The initiator of this was his son, whom he had high hopes for, but he did stupid things again and disappointed him. This time, he was even bolder and tried to confuse the royal bloodline. He even offended Princess Hyang. In fact, Emperor Luqingdi was so tolerant of Princess Heong not only because of her contributions to Qi Yuan, but also because his imperial aunt had an imperial edict in her hand. The imperial edict was stamped by the late emperor. The reason why it was stamped was that it was left by Emperor Luqingdi's grandfather. Although it wasn't something like a death sentence, it was enough to ensure that Princess Heong could live unscrupulously. Prince Rui is demoted to a commoner and imprisoned in the mansion. He is not allowed to take a step out. Emperor Luqingdi didn't even bother to say anything more. He directly sentenced Li Hongming to death and then directly stood up and left. https://11/11807/1403594. Mobile Edition. Chapter 528. Now that things had escalated to this point, this banquet naturally couldn't continue. However, such a big fun also needed to be properly digested. Therefore, whether it was good or not, everyone left one after another. Although it wasn't time yet, but presumably, the emperor wouldn't have any objections. What's more, it was Jin Qinhuang who took the lead. After watching this good show, Li Hongyuan was naturally the first to leave with Jingwan. He left in a natural and unrestrained manner. Although he was not as domineering as Princess Heong when she came and left, in terms of influence, Princess Heong could not be compared to him. After all, Princess Heong had long become a past tense. No matter how famous she was in the past, the effect she had now was quite limited. When they returned to the carriage, Jingwan's emotions showed on her face. She sighed with a little surprise. "Ah Yuan, if Princess Heong knew that she suffered an unexpected calamity and was schemed against by you because of her unique identity, I wonder what expression she would have." Princess Heong liked to tease people, but Jingwan did not have any bad feelings towards her. However, thinking of how Princess Heong must have been anxious because of her grandson's disappearance in the past few months, and maybe she would have blisters on her mouth, Jingwan inexplicably gloated. "Wan, if you want to know, you can go to Princess Heong and tell her about it. Anyway, you don't have to worry about her doing anything." Although Princess Heong was special, Li Hongyuan really did not care much. Although she would not do anything, she would definitely be angry. She would only go to look for trouble if she had nothing better to do. However, the child should have been taken away at the beginning. Why haven't I heard anything about Princess Heong in the past few months? It stands to reason that Princess Heong should have asked the emperor for help in this case. Princess Heong naturally would not act rashly and alert the enemy when she does not know anything. After all, the child may lose his life if something goes wrong. Moreover, he is only a child. It is easy to hide. Also, it is unlikely that the person on the throne would mobilize a lot of people for her. The result may not be much better than Princess Heong looking for him herself. Today, Princess Heong appeared in front of so many people because she got the exact news. Because she caught Prince Rui in the act, even if the emperor wanted to keep the peace, it was impossible. However, Princess Heong must know that she was schemed against. "Will she think of you?" Jingwan said the last sentence with a bit of ridicule. "So what?" Li Hongyuan did not take it seriously. "Yes, so what? No matter how special Princess Heong was, she was a woman after all. Moreover, her glory days were over. Even if Princess Heong knew it in the end, she could only be depressed and could not even shout it out. After all, Li Hongyuan could arrange for someone to take away her grandson, which meant that he knew her and her son's situation very well. At this age, Princess Heong did not have the drive and brashness of a young person. She would care about her family and her weakness. Therefore, at least for Princess Heong, she felt relieved that Prince Rui was demoted to a commoner because of that. After all, if Li Hongming did not have a bad idea, others would not have schemed against him. Well, Princess Heong could only comfort herself in this way. The child had been lost for a few months, but other than that, there was nothing else. This matter was over. That side was finished. Because Prince Rui had fallen from power, another storm had just begun. Prince Rui was demoted to a commoner. Although the prince's mansion was not taken back, it certainly could not be regulated as a prince anymore. First of all, 2/3 of the prince's mansion was removed. Of course, it was only separated by a wall and left empty. Then, many things were moved out. What could be used by a prince, certainly could not be used by a commoner. However, although Princess Lu lost her status as a princess, her 2 daughters were not deprived of their titles and still enjoyed the treatment of a commandery princess. Therefore, to some extent, the former Prince Rui's mansion actually had to live on the salary of the 2 commandery princesses. This was a great irony for Li Hongming. Of course, the former Princess Lu still had her family after all, so she would not be very miserable. After this happened, no one was happier than Prince Kong. These days, he was in a state of excitement. It seemed that without Li Hongming, the biggest threat, the throne was definitely in his bag. He was glowing, high-spirited, and walked with the wind. It seemed that he was afraid that others did not know how proud he was. It was not that no one reminded Prince Kong to restrain himself, but he was so happy that he could not restrain himself at all. Of course, some people who used to be his subordinates also became arrogant. Some courtiers who used to be Li Hongming's subordinates also became restless. However, at this time, they wanted to rely on Prince Kong. Of course, Prince Kong had to pretend to be pretentious. However, it was obvious that he would not refuse it all the time. After all, as long as he did not sit on the throne, he could not give up the support of his courtiers. Even if he wanted to settle accounts with them, he could only wait until he ascended the throne. In addition, other princes who were crowned as princes were also secretly working. They tried their best to rope in people, which made them gain some benefits. As for whether they really wanted to rely on Prince Kong or planned to take it slowly, it was hard to say. Chapter 529. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan were still leisurely. However, Jingwan felt that her husband seemed to be a little strange recently. She once wondered if she had lost her attraction to him because someone had abstained from sex. Jingwan was not joking. From the beginning of their marriage, she had a deep understanding of someone's ability in a certain aspect. Outside of her simple life, he would not indulge in sex every night without restraint. The next time depended mainly on the length of the previous ceremony. It was possible for him to have sex for 2 consecutive nights, but it was relatively rare for him to have sex for 3 consecutive nights. The longest interval was 4 or 5 days. This kind of situation was more common in the Northwest. Because he was busy, he would not indulge himself every time. However, it was different this time. It had been more than 10 days. Was he very busy? Not at all. It could be said that because he had dealt with Li Hongming, he had fewer things to do. However, it did not seem to be true that she was no longer attractive to him. When it was time to be clingy, he was clingy. When it was time to be intimate, he was still clingy. When it was time to be intimate, he was still clingy. Except for the lack of close physical contact, everything was normal. There was no little fairy. Jingwan felt strange in her heart. Then, she paid a little attention. It was not that he did not have any desire for her. It was just that he did not overdo it every time. It was not even to the extent before their marriage. Sometimes, when she saw his dark eyes, he wanted to swallow her alive. However, in the end, he endured it. From this point of view, there was no problem. Jingwan held her chin with one hand and tapped her face with her fingers. What was going on now? Jingwan's not very strong curiosity was aroused. Although a large part of it was because she was idle, and the other party was her husband, so she could ask for confirmation unscrupulously. Therefore, Jingwan began to court death. From time to time, she would tease the living king of hell. She even took out the birthday gift she gave him last year again. The living king of hell was never Lu Xiaohui. He caught Jingwan and taught her a lesson. However, he still did not teach her a lesson. In the end, he clasped Jingwan's waist, held her tightly in his arms, and pinched her chin. "Wan, are you lonely?" Jingwan's clothes were half undone. Her breath had not calmed down, and the corners of her eyes were obviously red. Hearing this, she squinted at Li Hongyuan. However, her current appearance was really not lethal. Instead, it made the man, who had just vented his desire, restless again. Li Hongyuan kissed Jingwan's lips. Then, he picked up Jingwan and prepared to take a bath. And it seemed that he was ready for a truce again. In this way, Jingwan was more and more confused about what this person was up to. However, because she could not get an answer, Jingwan became more and more courageous. She continued to court death in various ways, such as stewing soup for the living king of hell. Li Hongyuan's evil desire was already strong enough. Sometimes, he really wanted to directly strip people and give them a good spanking. However, Jingwan occasionally played tricks with a happy smile. Although Li Hongyuan was in a bad mood, he was actually in a good mood. As for being repeatedly asked what he wanted to do, Li Hongyuan was actually still hesitating about what he wanted to do. This was very rare for him, but he still persisted. Well, in fact, this kind of persistence was very uncomfortable. In the end, he chose to listen to the arrangement of fate this time. As for what he wanted, what he did not want, what he wanted, and what he did not want, he did not have an answer to these questions. Because, he had never thought about it properly. In his opinion, it was not necessary. Li Hongyuan did not have much self-control in front of Jingwan. However, when he really wanted to do something, this man's self-control was absolutely strong. Therefore, every time Jingwan courted death and was beaten up badly, she still did not achieve her goal in the end. After playing enough, Jingwan also stopped. In any case, she would know what her husband wanted to do. It was just a matter of time. This was not the first time. Jingwan resumed her daily life of planting flowers, painting, and raising pets. She was still as intimate with Li Hongyuan as before, but she would no longer deliberately tease him. To Li Hongyuan, this meant that he had lost a lot of interest. It must be known that being able to wait for his wife to take the initiative for once was not an easy thing to do. It was not easy for her to become a little vixen for once, and now she had become the Luo princess consort. Outside, there were open struggles and veiled struggles, and Li Hongyuan had not left the gates of the Wang Fu for a long time. Those people who still thought that Li Hongyuan was a good-for-nothing, naturally did not have any objections. After all, he was a big killing machine. For some people, it was really good that he did not appear. However, for those who secretly served him, it was a different matter. It was like a group of officials who were mentally and physically exhausted, but the one they served was an incapable monarch who indulged in pleasure and did not want to be too tired. Probably because they had been isolated from the outside world for too long, some people began to protest. It was not good for others to come to Jin Wang Fu, but Jingwan's sister-in-law was completely fine. Sun Yijia came with some tactful greetings from the head of the Luo family. Sun Yijia was now pregnant. Because it was her second child, the situation of this child was also very good. Therefore, she was not as cautious as the first child. Moreover, Sun Yijia was now more casual than ever. Those etiquette and rules that were embedded in her bones seemed to be dissipating little by little. At least, she was no longer as rigid and orderly as a textbook. Jingwan saw that Sun Yijia was walking rather quickly, and she seemed to be in a hurry. The servants behind her were all trembling in fear, as if they were afraid that Sun Yijia would fall if she wasn't careful. Okay, the roads of this Wang Fu are flat and will not be slippery. How could I fall? Sun Yijia waved her hand at the person who was waiting on her and did not bother with the formalities. She directly sat down. The change that the living environment had on a person was indeed very big. The Sun Yijia that they first met, who would have thought that she would become like this today? However, it did not feel bad at all. Why did sister-in-law think of coming to the Wang Fu? Jingwan pushed the drink that was specially prepared for Sun Yijia on the table. Sun Yijia was not polite and took a sip. The weather was hot. After being pregnant, the body temperature was naturally higher. Isn't it because you have been hiding in the Wang Fu for too long? The people at home are all worried, so I came to take a look. Jingwan was speechless. It's just that the weather is getting hotter and we don't want to go out. What is there to be worried about? I am not worried, but grandfather and grandmother are. Sun Yijia looked at Jingwan and said. Especially grandfather Ah. Recently, there have been a lot of things. In my eyes, he is definitely a cultured person. Recently, he seems to be a bit irritable Ah. Alright, Jingwan understood. You guys should try to persuade grandfather not to work too hard. Until now, there has been no news. It seems that he will not go to the summer palace in Qingda again this year. I will go back to take a look on the 6th of June. Sun Yijia nodded. Little sister Wan, what do you do all day long if you don't go out? Cultivate my body and mind. Jingwan took a sip of the special flower tea. Sun Yijia was slightly surprised. She suspected that Jingwan did not understand what she meant. Little sister Wan, are you sure? I am sure. Jingwan looked at her and smiled, taking care of the flowers and plants with the prince, painting some pictures, drinking tea, reading books, and occasionally playing a game of chess. I don't drink wine, wake up early and go to bed early. I do morning exercises every day. These are not cultivating my body and mind. That's really rare. Wasn't it rare that the king of hell was so obedient? A certain someone was really unbelievably obedient recently. The 6th of June was Aunt's Day. Bringing back a married daughter should be an auspicious day to dispel disaster and resolve resentment. Since the 5th of May, it could be said that she had been holed up in the Wangfu for a full month. Although there was a custom for married daughters to return to their maternal home on the 6th of June, it was not always followed. For example, if Jean Qin Wang Fei returned to her maternal home, then the daughters-in-law of the Luo family would not return. But the other married daughters of the Luo family would definitely return. The frequency of Jingwan returning to her maternal home was not high, but among the Wang Fei, she was definitely the most. And every time, Jean Qin Wang would be there. Therefore, the Luo family was very familiar with the matter of receiving Jean Qin Wang. They would do what they usually did. Receiving Jean Qin Wang was not a difficult matter. It was not much different from receiving other sons-in-law. On this point, the king of hell was not the king of hell at all. He was too close to the people. The Minister of Personnel specially stayed at home. He needed to have a good chat with Jean Qin Wang. He was already so old. It was not good to continue being so irritable. Fortunately, this fatuous ruler also had times when he was not fatuous. With just a few words, he appeased the Minister of Personnel. Obviously, because Sun Yijia brought back Jingwan's daily life, old Madame Luo could not help but say a few words of concern. Jingwan was more specific. After all, old Madame Luo was an elder. She did not need to be as vague as Sun Yijia when she asked about her grandson-in-law. After old Madame Luo heard it, she did not seem to feel that there was anything wrong and put it aside. Obviously, Jingwan did not say the most important part. Calculating the time, it had been more than 20 days. However, Jingwan felt that it should be about time. What a certain person wanted to do, the answer would be revealed soon. In reality, it was just as Jingwan thought. On the 11th of June, when Jingwan wanted to tidy up and go to bed, she was bitten by her own husband. From head to toe, from inside to outside. For the entire month, Jingwan had already prepared herself to be paralyzed in bed for the whole day tomorrow. However, in reality, it was once again unexpected. A certain person was done in one time, although the time this time was a bit longer. Jingwan turned around. Because of the vigorous exercise, her body was drenched in sweat. She looked at a certain person with his eyes closed. Moreover, from the places where their bodies touched, she could tell that he was very energetic. Jingwan got closer. She reached out and put her hand on his shoulder, rubbing the tip of her nose against his. Ah Yuan. After the passion, her voice was still a bit hoarse. Li Hongyuan opened his eyes. It was as if there was a ball of fire burning in his eyes. Wan, don't seduce me. How could Jingwan not feel his forbearance? Her slender jade-like hand stroked his body gently. Why are you enduring it? Li Hongyuan almost turned into a wolf, but at the last moment, he restrained himself. He grabbed Jingwan's hand and moved his body to prevent the most sensitive part of his body from touching Jingwan's body. In this way, after waiting for more than an hour, Li Hongyuan directly asked someone to prepare water and carried Jingwan to the bathroom to take a bath. Jingwan still didn't know what this man wanted to do, so even if she was a little sleepy, she didn't fall asleep. Tonight, she must find out the reason why a certain person was acting strangely. Before Jingwan could open her mouth to ask, she noticed something. Her heart suddenly jumped and she suddenly thought of a possibility. Ah Yuan, you didn't dissolve the medicine in the water. Looking at Li Hongyuan, her eyes flashed slightly. Li Hongyuan lowered his head and looked at her for a moment. Then, as if nothing had happened, he looked away. Didn't you say before that you have to raise at least one child? Tonight, it's up to luck. Jingwan was very surprised. This matter was really too sudden. She thought that the topic of children would really have to wait until after everything had been settled. Perhaps at that time, there would still be some discussion. Now, then the previous month was because he had been using contraceptive pills. Although this pill won't harm the body, Gong Jiu wasn't sure if it would affect the child, so he stopped for a month. Li Hongyuan caressed Jingwan's back from time to time. So that was the case. However, if he could endure for a month, did it mean that he wasn't as against children as she thought? Why are you suddenly thinking of having children? You didn't even mention it before. Jingwan used her finger to draw circles on his body. I told you before that we were husband and wife for one night in our previous life. That night, we had a child. Jingwan paused and sat up a little. Looking straight at Li Hongyuan, she asked, is it, tonight? Li Hongyuan nodded slightly and didn't say anything. In fact, Jingwan had always been curious about the child, but because she felt that a certain someone didn't like it, she held back and didn't mention it. Was he now thinking of having that child at this time? But he obviously didn't like it. Moreover, even if it's at the same time, it might not be the same child. There are many factors involved. The simplest one is that the physical condition of the me in your previous life and the current me is definitely different. You know. I know. Wan, you don't have to explain too much. The same person raised in different environments will be two completely different people. I don't want to have a son that is exactly the same. Jingwan looked at him with a complicated expression. Since that was the case, why did he choose to have it tonight? In fact, from what he had said before, it could be seen that he attributed part of his own death to that child. Because of this, he really did not like that child. However, He had given birth to that child and had personally raised him for a long time, so he did not hate that child. This was probably a complicated emotion that he could not control. Her husband had never believed in fate, but he couldn't be at ease as long as she didn't pass the trial of life and death. From this point of view, he obviously cared about fate very much. What a contradiction. Was it just because she had Luo Jingwan? Ah, Yuan, if I get pregnant, just like in your previous life, then. Wasn't he worried that she would be the same in the future? Wan. Li Hongyuan looked at her. His eyes were as deep as a pool that could swallow everything. He seemed to understand her unfinished words in an instant and interrupted her in a rather serious tone. At the same time, if I allow it, it can happen again. If I don't allow it, it can never happen again. https://11/11807/142444042. Chapter 530. Because he did not know whether she was pregnant or not, after that, the living king of hell entered the period of abstinence. Jingwan knew the reason and definitely would not go to provoke him again. This desire had been bred, and if it was not resolved, it would inevitably be very uncomfortable. Although it was not that there was no solution, Wang obviously did not like it too much. Li Hongyuan did not want to look for himself to suffer, so he also consciously restrained himself. As a result, between the two people, there was a very refreshing period of time. This pattern made the people who served them quite puzzled. For a time, they wondered if there was any problem between the two masters. But looking at their interactions during the day, it seemed that it was not the case. According to Gong Zhou's medical skills, he would be able to feel the pregnancy pulse in about half a month. However, before that, Jingwan almost had a result. Because her body was good, her period had always been very accurate. It was a cycle of 30 days, and there was basically no change. And this time, it was almost the ovulation period, so the probability of pregnancy was actually quite high. Li Hongyuan hugged Jingwan, his palm covering Jingwan's lower abdomen, gently stroking it. His expression was slightly unpredictable. It's been 3 days. Maybe it really is that little bastard. Give him a little chance, and he will come to this world. Regarding Jingwan's physical condition, as a qualified husband, he naturally knew it like the back of his hand. Jingwan turned her head to the back and looked at his impeccable side profile. She reached out and touched his chin. It's only been 3 days. Since you and I have been married until now, has it ever been more than 3 days? Ah, Yuan, you have to know that a person's mood will actually affect the body. So, maybe it's because I have some expectations that it will affect the body's condition. In fact, in Jingwan's opinion, there was a high chance that she was pregnant. She was happy, nervous, and uncertain. This uncertainty naturally came from the man behind her. By the time the child was born, she would be 18 years old. Giving birth should not be a problem. Moreover, because it was the person she loved, even if she had to suffer, she was willing to give birth to a child for him. However, a certain someone did not tell her in advance. It was a little sudden. Half a month's time did not seem to be enough to mentally prepare her. After all, once the child was born, it was not enough to feed him. Well, since she was in the royal family, she probably did not need to worry about education. So after thinking about it, she was still uncertain about this man's attitude towards the child. Wan, are you looking forward to it? Li Hongyuan's hand paused, and his voice sounded a little uncertain. Because it's Yuan's. It's our collective crystallization, the continuation of our lives. That's why we're looking forward to it. I'll be fine. You'll also like our child, right? Jingwan rubbed his chin. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you, Wan. He probably would not like someone who surprised his wife in this life. Jingwan was helpless. In a feudal dynasty, this man's thoughts were probably unique. Then, if it's really here, at least don't reject it and don't hate it, okay? Li Hongyuan did not comment and did not respond. Ask Gong Zhou to take your pulse tomorrow. Okay. It was good to be able to confirm it earlier. Ah Yuan, can you tell me about the child now? Li Hongyuan lowered his head and glanced at her. Then, he said casually, there's nothing to say. But, no matter what, it's your blood. Its temperament is quite similar to yours. It's also outstanding enough. That should be because your officials put in a lot of effort. Whether a person was outstanding or not, there were innate factors, but nurture was more important. Li Hongyuan suddenly fell silent. It felt a little gloomy. The speed at which he changed his expression was unparalleled. Jingwan didn't know what she had done to provoke him. What's wrong? That little bastard does have a lot of teachers. Do you know who his grand tutor is? From his expression, she knew that it was definitely someone who was in his minefield. It was either Qin Jingmin or Sun Yilin. And these two people, as long as there was no problem, in a few years, their knowledge was enough to take on the heavy responsibility of grand tutor. However, the possibility of Sun Yilin should be higher, because from what she learned, she had never interacted with Sun Yilin. No matter who it is, the most important credit is still Ah Yuan. Jingwan turned around, hugged his waist, and rubbed against him coquettishly. Li Hongyuan laughed mockingly, but did not say anything. Jingwan's heart was wide open. This man was really sick at the slightest disagreement. Her heart was tired. However, Jingwan had a protective talisman now. Even if a certain someone didn't like the child, he would still care about her health. So, in the next 9 months, she might be able to make a comeback and be the master of the family for once. She could ride roughshod over a certain someone. Jingwan touched her belly. In fact, she also liked the child in her belly. It was very unlikely that it was the one in her husband's previous life. Moreover, there was no way to verify it. It was quite a pity about this. The next day, Li Hongyuan directly sent someone to call Gong Zhou. In fact, Gong Zhou already had a guess about Jingwan's situation. Although she still had a straight face, she could not suppress her happiness. No matter what Li Hongyuan thought, in other people's eyes, a child was the foundation of a woman's life. This had never changed. With a child, their princess would be better. Gong Zhou had always been in a good mood, but the moment his fingers touched Jingwan's wrist for a moment, his eyes flashed. Your Highness, please change your hand. Since Gong Zhou came into the light, he focused on studying medicine. His medical skills had become more and more refined. There was basically no situation that could make him feel the pulse of both hands. So, needless to say, some things were basically confirmed. Congratulations to Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness. Your Highness is pregnant for more than half a month. Although it is still early, there is no doubt, https://11/11807/142444043. Mobile Edition. Chapter 531. Jingwan gently hooked up the corners of her mouth, and the people around her were all overjoyed. If it wasn't for the rules, they probably would have jumped up. Because they didn't understand the specific situation, they didn't show it on the surface, but they were extremely anxious for their Wang Fei. Fortunately, during this period, there was no one else around Li Hongyuan, so they could not show it, but their hearts were always hanging. Now, at this moment, their little hearts finally landed on the ground. Even if this child was a girl, it didn't matter. As long as it could be born, according to the degree of love between Wang Ye and Wang Fei, a young Junzhu and a young Wang Ye would definitely be indispensable. Jingwan glanced at her own lord husband. There really wasn't the slightest bit of joy of becoming a father. Even Gongzhou, who was born as a shadow guard, had a trace of joy in his eyes, happy for master. Gongzhou's heart was actually relieved, because that contraceptive pill had always been concocted by him. Other people didn't know. Wang Ye didn't want an heir, and he couldn't ask the reason. To some extent, the pressure wasn't small, and master hadn't taken medicine from him for a while. When Gongzhou realized it, he had a lot of expectations, but he didn't expect it to come so quickly. Gongzhou vaguely glanced at his master. Sure enough, on the matter of having a child, master wasn't the least bit enthusiastic. Others were worried to death, but he didn't care if he had an heir or not. That's right, the consensus of these people in Jin Wangfu was that the reason why their Wangfu didn't have a young master wasn't because of Wang Fei, but because of Wang Ye. Of course, it didn't refer to the body, but the mentality. Men who married early, it wasn't that there weren't any fathers at the age of 14 or 15, but at the age of 25, if they still didn't have any children, it was estimated that the whole family would be in a hurry. Those who had the ability, they could carry a pile of concubines into the house. Those who didn't have the ability, the one who would suffer would probably be their wives. As the saying goes, there are 3 ways to be unfilial, but Jin Wangfu was essentially an unfilial son. While Jingwan was helpless, she was also quite happy. To be able to meet this kind of man who put his wife first and put his children aside, it was definitely the luckiest thing for a woman, especially in the current situation. However, Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan. Although she didn't look happy, she didn't show any negative emotions. This was probably the best result. She couldn't ask for more. If there's anything they need to pay attention to, you can tell them clearly, no matter how big or small, Li Hongyuan said indifferently. Yes. Gongzhou responded and then left respectfully. At this time, the servants also noticed Li Hongyuan's abnormality. The prince did not seem like he had been without an heir for many years. Now, he finally had the attitude of someone who had a child. If it was a normal day, it would not be a big deal to see him like this. But now, it seemed that he was definitely unhappy. His initial joy was immediately discounted, and he began to feel uneasy. Jingwan saw that they were obviously frightened. To serve the king of hell, it was really pitiful. Jingwan waved her hand and let them all withdraw. As for how long it would take for their little hearts to return to normal, it was hard to say. After all, there were many things that Jingwan couldn't explain to them. Once again, only the husband and wife were left in the room. Jingwan turned towards Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan hurriedly supported her. His movements were gentler than usual as he took her into his arms. He frowned and said, "You're not alone now, be careful." How can it be so exaggerated? Jingwan didn't know how big a 2-week-old fetus was. According to the last menstrual cycle in her previous life, it was actually 4 weeks old. But she was sure that it wasn't even half a grain of rice. She didn't do anything. Relax, it's okay. Relax? Li Hongyuan estimated that he wouldn't be able to relax until she gave birth safely. Once again, he put his hand on Jingwan's lower abdomen. As expected, we shouldn't have had it. Why don't we just get rid of it? Jingwan gently patted him and glared at him. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm worried that you will suffer. Li Hongyuan rested his chin on Jingwan's head. Because it's you, I'm willing. Jingwan was very happy and blessed to be cherished so much by the person she loved. To be honest, this was something that Jingwan didn't even dare to think about. She reached up and hooked Li Hongyuan's neck. She rubbed it up and down as if she was comforting him, but also as if she was just enjoying this kind of intimacy. After all, it's rare to have a difficult delivery like Ying Shuang. When you're nurturing the fetus, be careful and prepare the best doctor and midwife in advance. Trust me, nothing will happen. Li Hongyuan didn't say anything. He just hugged Jingwan quietly. After a while, Jingwan sat up straight. She narrowed her eyes and looked at Li Hongyuan with a little mischievousness. Ah, Yuan, you're worried about me. Also, I won't be able to serve you for a few months. Are you unhappy? Li Hongyuan gave her a light smack on her butt. Behave yourself. I can't deal with you now. I'll put it all on your tab. When the time comes, do you want to settle it all at once or separately? Wan, you'd better think carefully. Jingwan, who had wanted to take the opportunity to be arrogant, immediately wilted. For the sake of her own life, she should forget about it. Originally, because of the little bastard in Jingwan's belly, Li Hongyuan had already been wronged. In the future, he would be wronged for a long time. And in the future, whether it was a boy or a girl, there was a high chance that they would snatch her from him. At least when the child was young and didn't know anything, his wife would most likely be on the child's side. The more he thought about it, the darker his face became. Was he looking for trouble for himself? He, Li Hongyuan, also had a time when he did such a stupid thing. Li Hongyuan stroked Jingwan's belly a little harder. On the other hand, Jingwan did not feel anything. However, when she saw the expression on someone's face, Jingwan sighed in her heart. From this moment on, she was destined to not be a qualified mother. If she gave too much time to her child, then her child was destined to not be able to gain the love of his father. As a proud son of God, he might even lead a miserable life. Jingwan's hand covered Li Hongyuan's hand and lit 32 candles for the little thing that couldn't be any smaller. She silently apologized. In the future, she could only try her best to make time. After all, the child's father was going to be the emperor. When he was going to be the emperor, no matter how much work he did, he definitely had to make time every day to be busy with official business. Jingwan touched Li Hongyuan's cheek and smiled softly. The child is only a part of our life. But no matter what, in my heart, at all times, you are the most important. Jingwan decided to smooth his hair first. Of course, her words were not mixed with any exaggeration. Li Hongyuan was probably really pleased, and his face eased a little. Jingwan nestled in his arms again. Grandmother and the others have been looking forward to it. Should we tell them now, or wait until the baby is stable? There was no doubt that although Jingwan had told grandmother and the others about the child, even if they understood, it didn't mean that they weren't worried at all. It's a little early now. There's no need to wait until the baby is stable. There's no reason for our child to have a problem. But let's wait for another half a month. At least it'll be clearer. Well, I'll listen to you. The couple was warm here, but the others were not so happy. On one hand, they were happy, but on the other hand, they were conflicted. Of course, there were also people like Gong Jiu and Gong Mama. They were purely happy because they were very clear about the importance of Wang Fei to Wang Ye. Worrying about Wang Fei was completely superfluous. Gong Mama had actually learned how to take care of pregnant women, but what she learned before was only theoretical knowledge. There was no real practice, so she had to understand as much as possible. Naturally, she would not let Gong Jiu go. It was true that Gong Jiu's medical skills were good, but in the field of gynecology, he was still not as good as those who specialized in it. But now, for Wang Fei and the little master, he would definitely study it carefully. When Jingwan gave birth, maybe another gynecologist would be born. Without the master's order, the people below would certainly not dare to spread it. However, the people closest to Jingwan could still be told. For example, the few servant girls who had been married off would definitely be happy for Jingwan. As long as they were conflicted, they would temporarily put it aside and do their best for Wang Fei. Therefore, when outsiders still didn't know, the entire Jin Wangfu had already revolved around Jingwan. Although, most of the servants still didn't know the specific situation. https://11/11807/143633147. Chapter 532. However, although Bai Xiao was busy, she did not wander around in front of Jingwan. Because she knew that if her Wang face saw her, she would definitely be ordered to go back and nurture the fetus. Bai Xiao and He Mei had followed their father through the mountains and forests since childhood. Later on, their family changed and the journey was hard. Later on, she was brought back by Li Hongyuan to be nurtured. It was only when she reached Jingwan's side that she had a lot of free time. However, Bai Xiao's nature was one that could not stop. She worked herself into a life of toil. When she was bored, she did not feel bored. Even when she was pregnant, it was still the same. However, her condition had always been good. It was probably because of this that bodyguard Qian did not complain to Jingwan. Jingwan entered the nurturing mode. In fact, it started from that night when she was completely unsure whether she would be pregnant or not. The most obvious point was that Jingwan stopped her morning exercise from that day until the next morning. Now that she was sure that she was pregnant, it was impossible for her to have any large movements. Other than that, Jingwan's daily life did not change. However, in the past, Li Hongyuan did not allow Jingwan to have intimate contact with those furry little fellows. Now, she could not even see them. They were all ordered by Li Hongyuan to be sent to the farmstead. Last year, Li Hongyuan's farmstead opened. In the summer, it became a place for many people to escape the heat and find fun. This year, it was still open. Following their return, the horse track had long reopened its doors and organized races. It was still popular. After they went to the northwest last year, in order to avoid trouble, the horse track was closed. It was not that no one tried to find another place to race horses, but in the end, it was far from being effective. The other members of the imperial family either did not have enough weight or did not have the courage to take the lead. After tasting the wonderful taste of a large-scale race, that kind of small-scale race was naturally lacking in interest. The original layout of Jin Qinhuang Fu meant that there were relatively few houses. Because there were many flowers and trees, the temperature was relatively low compared to other manors. Moreover, in specific locations, there were flowers and trees that repelled mosquitoes and insects. The fragrance would not affect people. Even if one did not go to the country estate, staying in Jin Qinhuang Fu was still relatively comfortable. However, after a while, Jingwan began to feel helpless again. It was all because a certain someone was too strict with her. She was completely like a fragile object. She couldn't touch the lower plants or bend her waist. She couldn't reach out her hand or stretch her waist for the higher plants. Moreover, there were many plants that she couldn't get close to because she was worried that the fragrance would affect her body. Forget about that. When she was painting, she couldn't exceed 15 minutes. In the first 3 months, the main activity was walking. Because of her good physique, Jingwan set a time of 2 hours, which was divided into several periods. Every time, there would be people around her. Those who didn't know would only think that Jin Qinhuang cared a lot about this piece of meat in his belly. Well, in reality, he cared about her. At this point, Jingwan was still in a good mood and didn't show any strange temper. At most, she would occasionally pull on a certain someone's face to vent her inner depression. A certain someone was completely tolerant and pampered her. Jingwan's current state, other than the fact that she probably hadn't reached the stage where her body would show various symptoms, the fact that Li Hongyuan accompanied her almost all day should also be a large factor. In this way, more than half a month passed. Li Hongyuan directly had people invite the imperial physician. In fact, it was through the imperial physician that he conveyed this message to a certain person. The imperial physician who took Jingwan's pulse popped out these good words as if they didn't cost money. After all, in the imperial physician's view, Jin Qinhuang's marriage was difficult a few years ago and he finally married a Wang Fei. After a long time, she wasn't pregnant, so his heart must be unhappy. Now that Jin Qinhuang's Wang Fei was finally pregnant, Jin Qinhuang didn't know how happy he would be. And as the person who diagnosed the slippery pulse, how could this reward be small? However, when he belatedly realized that Jin Qinhuang wasn't that excited, he was a few beats slower to remember that Jin Qinhuang Fu had a Fu doctor with excellent medical skills. How could he not know? The initial excitement must have already passed. Then he thought that he could obviously go to the emperor to ask for a reward. The emperor was looking forward to Jin Qinhuang's heir, similarly looking forward to the stars and the moon. However, Jin Qinhuang Fu was rich and overbearing and still gave the imperial physician a large reward. The imperial physician was a high-risk profession, but encountering this kind of good thing was also the envy of many people. Thus, the news of Jin Qinhuang's Wang Fei's pregnancy was like a spring caressing the earth. In a very short period of time, the common people of the capital knew. If it was said that they didn't pay attention before, then at this time, they discovered that they seemed to be looking forward to Jin Qinhuang's child. Not to mention other things, just based on Jin Qinhuang's appearance, if the child took after him, not to mention a boy, if it was a girl, who knew how beautiful it would be. Of course, this was only the thought of those who had seen Jin Qinhuang. After the imperial physician's diagnosis, Jin Qinhuang Fu had already sent someone to Luo Jia to report. Although Luo Jia had always been looking forward to Jingwan's stomach having good news, when they received the good news, they were still quite surprised. However, after that moment, almost everyone was beaming with joy, especially old Madame Luo. Originally, at her age, it was rare for her to show her emotions on her face, but now the smile on her face couldn't be suppressed. Without needing old Madame Luo's order, the mama beside her quickly went to prepare things. It seemed that old Madame would definitely make a trip herself. At this time, old Madame Luo basically couldn't sit still. She paced back and forth in the room, occasionally giving orders to prepare something. The womenfolk of the other branches all rushed over as soon as they received the news. After seeing old Madame Luo's state, they looked at each other and once again recognized Jingwan's position in old Madame's heart. It should be known that when Luo Jia's granddaughters-in-law were pregnant, whether it was the first child or the second child, or whether it was the first child of the fourth generation, old Madame was always calm and collected. There was joy, but it was far from being like this. These daughters-in-law of Luo Jia had a good mentality and were not jealous. Seeing that old Madame Luo acted as if she didn't see them and ordered people to prepare something, Sun Yijia smiled and stepped forward. "Grandmother, what doesn't Jin Qinhuang Fu have? It's enough to prepare a set of necessary things. We should go to the Wang Fu early to see Wang Fei. Wang Fei is the first child and there are no elders in the Wang Fu, maybe Wang Fei is nervous and uneasy." Right, old Madame Luo patted her forehead. "Jingbo's daughter-in-law is right, I was so happy that I became muddle-headed." Thus, not long after, under old Madame Luo's lead, the Luo family took several carriages to Jin Qinhuang Fu. At this time, there was no need to avoid taboo. At this time, if there were still people who made irresponsible remarks or suspected something, then it really couldn't be justified. Under the situation where the Wang Fu was not doing anything, it was the first time that so many womenfolk of the Luo family went to the Wang Fu's door. When they saw Jingwan, Li Hongyuan was also there. After they greeted each other, Li Hongyuan and old Madame Luo chatted for a bit and then left. In the end, he was a grown man. How could he stay here for so long? Then, Jingwan was about to get up when old Madame Luo hurriedly stepped forward. "What are you getting up for? Quickly sit down." Looking at her grandmother who also treated her as a fragile object, Jingwan sat down obediently. Otherwise, who knew what grandmother would nag her about. It must be known that these days, a certain man also had a black face because of some of her unintentional actions. He was almost becoming a black face god. Jingwan naturally learned to be obedient. When it came to her husband and grandmother, at certain times, grandmother's lethality would definitely rise in a straight line. Things that could be muddled through by acting spoiled in front of her husband, grandmother would slap you back. Old Madame Luo sat next to Jingwan and carefully looked at her. Seeing that there was no difference from before, she was relieved. Then, she asked about Jingwan's situation in detail, from her physical condition to her diet, and even asked about Li Hongyuan's attitude and so on. Jingwan was very patient about the first part, but for the last part, Jingwan could only tell her grandmother about it. The problem was that there were so many people now. Jingwan's skin had become thicker now, but she still felt awkward. Grandmother, everyone knows how His Highness treats Her Highness. Now that Her Highness is pregnant with His Highness's child, His Highness will be very happy. He will definitely treat Her Highness even better. Sun Yijia smiled as she arranged the flowers. At the same time, she winked at Jingwan when no one else could see. The bad thing about having elders around was that they couldn't speak as they pleased. So-called best friends meant that they could share everything that they couldn't say to their elders and husbands, regardless of whether it was good or bad. Jingwan also smiled back at Sun Yijia. Old Madame Luo also realized that her words were indeed a little inappropriate. I'm so confused. Grandmother, you were just too happy. After that, the topic became more casual and no longer revolved around Jingwan. However, because there were no young girls, they talked about parenting. From grandmother old Madame Luo, to eldest Aunt Wang, to sister-in-law Sun Yijia, they all had their own ideas. Of course, there were also those who had no right to speak, such as third Aunt Lu. After all, it was indeed inappropriate for her to say anything about raising a daughter like Luo Jingying. She could only listen quietly at the side. However, when she thought of Luo Jingying, Mrs. Lu's expression became more or less gloomy. She was pregnant 3 years ago, but in the end, she ended up like that. Now, she was a little better than before, but she was only 17 years old and she didn't have much vitality. It was as if she had one foot in the grave. She didn't know what would happen if she continued like this. There was a meal in the prince's mansion, and the Luo family didn't go back until most of them had left. Under normal circumstances, the maternal family would send the pregnant daughter away at this time. They would send experienced nannies and perhaps young and beautiful maids. It went without saying what they were for. However, when it came to Jingwan's matter, Mrs. Zhang could only stand aside. Everything was decided by old Madame Luo. However, old Madame Luo didn't seem to have thought of this and didn't mention it at all. After returning to the Luo family, Mrs. Zhang struggled for a while and finally decided to talk to her mother-in-law. What are you doing here? After half a day of settling down, old Madame Luo had returned to normal. Mother, I saw that Wanwan's maids are all dressed up as young girls. We all know Wanwan's character. Before she got married, she didn't like concubines. But now that Wanwan is pregnant, how can she serve His Highness? If Wanwan is stubborn and refuses to give face to her maids, won't she be hostile to His Highness? So, what do you want to do? Old Madame Luo said coldly. Mrs. Zhang noticed that something was wrong with old Madame Luo, but she didn't know the details, so she could only bite the bullet. Should we send 1 or 2 people directly to Wanwan? Then wait for your daughter to hate you for the rest of her life. Old Madame Luo was angry. This daughter-in-law still didn't make any progress. Just take care of your husband. Don't worry about anything else. Mrs. Zhang felt wronged. She knew that her daughter didn't like it, but she couldn't be estranged from her husband just because she didn't like it. The husband and wife had to spend the rest of their lives together. Was Mrs. Zhang's idea wrong? In fact, it was not wrong. 9 out of 10 mothers had the same idea. From this point of view, old Madame Luo still understood her. However, the more it was like this, the more it could only prove that Mrs. Zhang wasn't close to her daughter. Because they weren't close, she didn't know anything about the situation. Under normal circumstances, after the husband promised to be together for the rest of his life, wouldn't the first person he shared with after returning to the maternal family be his own mother? However, Mrs. Zhang didn't know anything about Jingwan, so she came up with a bad idea at this time. Jingwan and Mrs. Zhang weren't close, and old Madame Luo never thought that it was Jingwan's fault. Okay, go back and do what you need to do. Don't think too much. Just wait for your grandson or granddaughter in the future, old Madame Luo said and looked at her a few more times. Don't make decisions and do stupid things. Mrs. Zhang felt even more wronged. She really didn't think of making decisions. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come to old Madame Luo. Why are you still here? Are you waiting for me to ask you to stay for dinner? Daughter-in-law will take her leave. Mrs. Zhang had to leave. It had to be said that old Madame Luo's attitude towards her was not good. If it didn't involve anything, it would be peaceful. But if it did, Mrs. Zhang would be scolded. Mrs. Zhang was used to it and didn't get angry with old Madame Luo. However, she was still worried about Jingwan. She was afraid that she would be too stubborn and have a conflict with Li Hongyuan. The other party was a prince. If there was a conflict, the family couldn't support her. At night, she went to find her husband, Luo Rongyan. This time, Luo Rongyan climbed up the ranks faster. Originally, it was just an idle position. Now, he was a member of the 5th rank. It could be said that he jumped several times in a row. Although it was still not obvious in the capital, he had entered the circle of officialdom. Luo Rongyan was never a stupid person. Even if he didn't know clearly, as long as he was willing to think about it, he could basically know most of it. In particular, there were many things that Luo Peishan didn't say clearly, but he didn't hide it too strictly. As long as he was careful, there would be clues. Don't think so much. Our daughter and the prince will be fine. Our daughter has always been opinionated. She knows what she is doing. If you interfere, you may cause trouble for her. You just have to live your life peacefully. Is there really no problem? There is really no problem. Luo Rongyan said with certainty. After he said so, Mrs. Zhang was relieved. In her life, the person she trusted the most was probably Luo Rongyan. Lu Qingdi also gave a big reward that day. Basically, it could be seen that he was very happy. Jingwan's special honor was when Princess Kong was pregnant. Lu Qingdi's first grandchild received a reward, but it was far less than what Jingwan received now. However, there were 2 palace maids in the reward, which made people unhappy. https://11/11807/143798116. Chapter 533. In such a large Wangfu, there would certainly be a lot of people, especially Jin Qin Wang, who was somewhat picky. If there were fewer people, they would certainly not be able to meet his requirements. The best job was of course to serve the 2 masters in the main courtyard. However, those who could enter the main courtyard would certainly be the minority of the minority. They would be carefully selected and exceptionally strict. Even if Jingwan's several head maidservants were married, they would have long been supplemented. It would not be easy for others to get their turn. When Jin Qin Wang wandered around the courtyard, he was basically accompanying Wang Fei. At other times, even his shadow could not be seen. How could they meet and hook up? The road to the main courtyard was also blocked. Therefore, even if some people had some ideas, they did not have the conditions to implement them. But the situation now was not the same. Wang Fei was pregnant and could not serve Wang Ye. Moreover, according to Wang Fei's temperament, the possibility of her opening the faces of the people around her was very small. Otherwise, she would have opened the faces long ago. Then their opportunity would come. You say, there were many young ladies of noble families outside. However, other than Wang Fei, their Wang Ye had to be restrained by the title of Wang Fei. Thus, the range of choices was very small. And could the young ladies of ordinary families compare to the delicate skin and tender flesh of their Wang Fu's maidservants? Thus, rather than looking outside, it would be better to choose from within the Fu. Thinking so beautifully, it seemed that she had also thought of all aspects. It seemed that she did not think that Jin Qin Wang would abstain from sexual intercourse. Therefore, after learning that Jingwan was pregnant, in just a short span of 1 or 2 days, the entire Jin Qin Wang Fu became somewhat unstable. It seemed that suddenly, there were many young and beautiful maidservants in the Wang Fu. Originally, it was a hot summer day, wearing thin clothes, that figure was more and more reflected. Exquisite and exquisite, stepping on the bottom line to dress themselves up, it was truly a gorgeous display of flowers, allowing many people to feast their eyes. As usual, Jing Wan was taking a stroll around the prince's mansion. When she saw this scene, her first reaction was, did the prince's mansion pick people from the farmstead? The servants in the prince's mansion were either from the farmstead or from the imperial household. Princess consort, he didn't. Granny Gong said coldly. It was said that a pregnant woman would be dumb for 3 years, but Jingwan's IQ was still online. She just didn't react before. After all, she was too free and unfettered with her own husband. There were no mistresses, so she almost forgot about the existence of these creatures. Thus, she forgot about the duties that a virtuous Wang Fei should fulfill. She forgot, but many people would not forget. The most obvious one was Lu Qingdi, even though Jingwan still didn't know that Lu Qingdi had sent 2 palace maids as gifts. Those 2 palace maids that made the living king of hell unhappy had already been dealt with. So what if Lu Qingdi sent them over, the living king of hell still didn't give face? And in Jin Qin Wang Fu, it was only a few people who died. Even if it was brought to Lu Qingdi, it was of no use. Did the living king of hell still need a reason to kill people? And the others would remind her in various ways. Jingwan understood in a flash. It was just that as a wife, being pregnant was already hard. She had to take the initiative to arrange someone to warm her husband's bed, so as to not let her husband feel wronged. She couldn't be angry, she couldn't be jealous, otherwise, she would be unvirtuous. Nonsense, what the hell were these things? Pregnant people, because of endocrine imbalance, would have emotional changes. Their emotions might be uncontrollable and fluctuating. Jingwan seemed to be a little affected now, her eyes becoming a little gloomy. Granny, go gather all of them. Jingwan suddenly smiled. Granny Gong had served Jingwan for several years and was naturally clear about the changes in her emotions. Thus, at this moment, she clearly felt that there was something wrong with Jingwan. But, so what? It was normal for pregnant people to have strange changes. In any case, even if Wang Ye didn't order, they would completely obey Princess Consort. Yes. Thus, in the entire Prince Yu's mansion, all the unmarried women over the age of 13 were gathered, even the inferior maids were no exception. These people were a little confused at first, but when they saw Princess Consort sitting in the pavilion, some of them seemed to spontaneously understand the whole story, and they couldn't help but be excited. However, at the same time, those smart people seemed to be a little uncertain about how to appear in front of Princess Consort while they were excited. From Wang Ye's point of view, he should like Princess Consort the most. Otherwise, why would he favor Princess Consort the most? But now they were facing Princess Consort. No woman would like someone who looked like her. Based on the current situation, if they wanted to stand in front of Wang Ye, they had to go through Princess Consort first. Thus, imitating Princess Consort wouldn't work. Women were born jealous and didn't like women who were prettier than them. So, it was impossible to be prettier than Princess Consort. Princess Consort had always been dignified and elegant, so it was impossible to be enchanting and charming. Wang Ye didn't like those who passed Princess Consort. Or, well, they didn't have time to think about it, let alone change their makeup. In the past, she didn't pay attention to it. She didn't think that when they all gathered together, the number of people was not small. Jingwan reclined on the couch and propped up her chin with one hand. Is there anyone from the opera troupe inside? Replying to Princess Consort, there isn't. The people from the opera troupe and the Fu's singers and dancers are all very well behaved and stay in West Yuan. They won't come out easily, and it has been like this for the past 2 days. Those people had already been screened. Those who had that thought had already left Jin Wangfu. Of course, some people had hidden their thoughts deeply, but it was obvious that they wouldn't expose it at this juncture. For Jingwan, this could be considered as a small comfort. Remove the irrelevant people ba. Jingwan raised her chin at the rows of people. Gong Mama had a pair of sharp eyes, and Jingwan's wet nurse had been in charge of human affairs for a long time, so her eyesight definitely wasn't bad. Together, the two of them went through these people once. In the end, whether they had any strange thoughts, they could basically see it. This wasn't just based on clothing. After all, some women naturally loved to dress up and wanted to be beautiful at any time. This wasn't wrong. The irrelevant people, they should do what they should do. As for the rest, there was only about 30% left. Jingwan sat up straighter. At a glance, each and every one of them was really as tender as spring onions. In the past, how could she not notice that there were so many beauties hidden in the Wangfu? Sure enough, Jin Qinwang liked beauties, so much so that those who could enter Jin Qinwang had to look at their appearance. Come one by one, walk around here. First, let Ben Wangfei take a look at your manners. Then we'll talk about it again. The group of beautiful servant girls looked at each other in dismay. But since Wang Fei had spoken, they had no choice but to do as she said. Ancient costume show, and, although it was neither fish nor fowl, but it was still okay to pass the time a little. Walking one round after another, Jingwan didn't call for them to stop, so they could only brace themselves and walk. In this July day, they were directly exposed to the sun. Living in the Wangfu, although they were servants, but they basically didn't do rough work. Their skin and flesh were also pampered. After being exposed to the sun for a long time, there would be some burning discomfort. If they continued to be exposed to the sun, there was an 80 to 90% chance that a layer of skin would peel off. At this moment, they finally knew that Wang Fei was indeed a jealous person, using such a vicious method to punish them. Jingwan looked at their gradually changing expressions, but there was no emotion on her face, not wanting status, all wanting to climb into the male master's bed, for what? The servants of Jin Wangfu, this month's salary should be the highest in the entire Jin Wangfu. The New Year's reward added up, compared to ordinary families, it's unknown how much better it is. To say, climbing into the bed, to be able to get a status, to become half a master, it's still reasonable. But here in Jin Wangfu, it's clear that there is no status, being slept with for nothing, at most they can get a bit of money. Wang Fei, without status, can still hope to have an heir. If you are pregnant, the mother will rely on the child's status. Even if there is no status, a child with Wang Ye's bloodline can pull up a large family. Even if their status is still a lowly one, in many people's eyes, they are actually masters. Just like the saying, in front of the Prime Minister's door, there is a 7th-rank official, more or less the same principle. When Jingwan heard this, she smiled, but there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. These people. Jingwan hadn't finished speaking when she saw a servant girl kneel down in front of her. Wang Fei, these servants know their wrongs, begging you to have mercy. This sun is so vicious, if it continues, I'm afraid. Wang Fei, begging you to have mercy. As she spoke, she kowtowed with a pang, pang, pang sound, her forehead showing signs of blood. Jingwan raised an eyebrow. If she was kowtowing, then kowtow. Why did she deliberately lower her collar and stretch out her neck? Also, that appearance that looked like she was about to faint, but still persisted, stubborn and weak. Her forehead and neck formed a sharp contrast. There really was a kind of tyrannical beauty. Wang Fei, Wang Ye is here. The servant girl who served close to her reminded. Jingwan looked over. Sure enough, that peerlessly handsome man strode over. She was wondering, how could someone suddenly put on such a show? This was to paint her in the eyes in front of a certain person. TSK, Jingwan's heart was a little angry at this moment. She didn't want to get up at all. Li Hongyuan directly walked over and sat beside her. He didn't know Jingwan completely, but he had at least 80 to 90%. Moreover, Jingwan didn't even try to hide it. Although she was smiling, it was a fake smile. How could Li Hongyuan not know that she wasn't very happy in her heart right now? He held her hand. It's already past time, why haven't you gone back? It's hot outside. Wang Ye, have you finished the matters at hand? It's already finished. That's good. Look, these people all admire Wang Ye and want to be Wang Ye's bed-warming maidservants. Aren't I pregnant? They say it's to solve my problems. Outsiders definitely don't know what Wang Ye likes better than you. If you see someone you like, just take her back. Even if you can't give her a status, I can make the decision to set up a few tables for her. It was Li Hongyuan's first time seeing Jingwan's eccentric appearance. His eyes slid around her belly. Was it because she was pregnant that her temper became strange? Under normal circumstances, Li Hongyuan couldn't help but fiercely teach Jingwan a lesson, let her know that she couldn't eat carelessly, let alone speak carelessly. Reaching out, he gently hugged Jingwan into his arms and leaned close to her ear. What kind of woman this husband likes? Wanwan knows better than anyone else, right? How much Wanwan owes this husband remembers it all. When you give birth to this little bastard, this husband will make you pay back the principal and interest. Jingwan bluntly rolled her eyes at him. Li Hongyuan rubbed her cheek with the tip of his nose. Wanwan originally only needed to think about this husband in her heart, but because of this little bastard, Wanwan has already neglected this husband a lot. Now, do you still want to be angry with this husband because of an unrelated person? Li Hongyuan directly raised the end of his words, low and sexy, and his warm breath sprinkled on her ear. In an instant, Jingwan's body went limp. The summer heat, coupled with the high body temperature of a pregnant woman, made her feel even hotter. She seemed to be covered in fine beads of sweat from head to toe. Bastard, after knowing so much, how could he not know that the first 3 months couldn't have intercourse? Alright, it wasn't just about intercourse. It was because she couldn't have too much physical pleasure. If her uterus contracted violently, it could cause harm to the child. Jingwan reached out to push him away. Stay away, it's so hot. If it's hot, then go back. Li Hongyuan ignored the others' gazes and directly carried Jingwan up. Jingwan didn't struggle. Whether it was her strange temper or jealousy, she didn't care. She wrapped her arms around his neck and leaned on his shoulder with a clear conscience. Just send these people to the manor. Don't do unnecessary things. Just treat it as praying for the child. If he continued to let them stay in the prince's mansion, he didn't know what kind of trouble they would cause. It was better to send them away. Although they wouldn't cause any trouble, they would more or less annoy him. Move and we'll handle it. Without any special instructions, Mu and stayed until the end. When Li Hongyuan and the others completely disappeared, eunuch Mu, who had no sense of existence before, straightened his back, and his momentum rose sharply. His feminine face was now gloomy and cold, and his eyes were extremely sharp. He looked at these maids who had wild thoughts. Those who met his eyes all shivered. They were really pitiful, as if the most tender twigs were hit by the violent wind and rain and had their leaves and branches broken, instead of pretending to be weak and pitiful. One by one, they couldn't stand it. Their legs went soft, and they knelt on the ground. Eunuch Mu walked to the maid who slandered Jingwan, squatted down, and reached out to clasp the back of her neck. "Bitch, how dare you slander the princess and try to climb up the social ladder?" Eunuch, I didn't. I really didn't. Eunuch. Ah, her begging for mercy turned into a scream in an instant. Eunuch Mu suddenly pressed her head and smashed it hard on the ground. The bang was much louder than that of the maid kowtowing just now. This is kowtowing and admitting your mistake, do you understand? Eunuch Mu grabbed her hair and smashed her on the ground again and again. Soon, there was a pool of blood on the ground. Eunuch Mu pushed her away and let her lie on the ground. Obviously, she had fainted. It seemed that she might not die. After all, the princess had said not to kill anyone. However, it was hard to say whether she would become a fool or not. Eunuch Mu stood up and slowly wiped his hands with a handkerchief. Send all of them to the villages in other places, https://11/11807/143798819. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.